All right, so a few logistics for the call. This call will be recorded. You'll want to make sure that you've entered the 2-digit audio PIN and press pound when you log in. That will allow us to be able to mute or unmute you. This will be an interactive call, so you won't just get to sit there and kick back. We'll be asking for your thoughts and responses to a few prompts that we have incorporated into the presentation. And then also, of course, we can take your questions via the chat panel as we move throughout the call, but want to alert you to the fact that we'll set aside some time for Q&A at the end of the call. And this request will require a little bit of skill, but in order to prevent background noise, I'm going to ask that you mute your phones on your end, and you also want to turn down the speakers. So, and what you'll have to do is get used to muting and unmuting yourself, because what we'll do is ask for your thoughts and participation, and so that you can be heard, you'll want to make sure that you're unmuted. And also, in order to prevent some of the feedback, we'll need you to turn down the speakers that are in your office. And then also, we will post a recording of this webinar on Gateway Live on Monday, and as well as the associated materials, so the articles that a lot of what we'll discuss today is based off of. A little bit about the control panel. You'll see a little thin box on the right of your screen, usually the upper right. Click on this red arrow, the red box with the white arrow. That will allow you to open and close the control panel. And for folks who may have trouble getting onto the call, this area right here is where the audio pin is located if you haven't entered it yet. So the number to access the call is located here, the access code, and then the audio pin is in this area as well. If you are interested in sending a question, or excuse me, if you're interested in, if you have a question, use the chat feature, which is right here. Once you click on that, it opens up and a box appears, and it allows you to type in text. And then also you can send that to me individually, or it allows you to send to the entire audience as well. So hopefully that will be of use. And so what we'll do is do a round of introductions, and we'll introduce ourselves in this end, and then what I'll do is just go down the control panel and call you by name, and if you could, just share, of course, your name, title, and the program that you're with. So, Galen?
All right. So I'm Galen Brannon-Trottier. I work with the Manager Training and Partner Support with Gateway Program.
Thanks. And I'm Prentice Davis, Senior Manager of Training and Partner Support here at the National Network. So I wonder if we could get Chris to go ahead and introduce himself.
Can you hear me?
I can.
All right. So my name's Christopher Carey, and I am in Spokane, Washington, and we're just starting the Gateway to College program at Spokane Falls Community College, and I'll be involved with the initial support quarter.
All right.
Teaching math.
Great.
Teaching math.
Yep. Thanks, Chris, for joining us. What about Deb Bebo?
Hello, Deb Bebo, Assistant Dean of Transitions Programming at Mount Wachusett Community College, Gateway to College, and also working with the Network for Training and Partner Support with the 3 new MassGrad Gateway sites in the state.
Yeah, so what she's trying to say is she doesn't have very much spare time.
I have no life.
And then, yeah. And then we have another member of the partner support team here in the office. Georgia, are you with us? Okay, so we one member of the who's also a manager of training and partner support who's on the call is Georgia Lawrence, and she does a little bit of coaching for programs in the network, as well as supports some of the programs as well. Kay, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm Kay Blue, and I'll be one of the English and Study Skills instructors for the Gateway program when it begins at Owens Community College in Toledo in the fall.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, Kay. We also have Peg.
Hi, Prentice. Peg
Hi.
Omaha, Nebraska, director of the Gateway to College program here, and we are just finishing our second year of serving students. We have most of our students, though, enrolled for classes this summer, some with a lighter schedule than others.
Okay. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And we also have, I was mentioning one of our managers of training and partner support.
Hi there. My name is Georgia Lawrence, and as Brenda said, I'll be supporting teams with instructional coaching as well as general partner support.
Thanks, Georgia. And representing Mott Community College, Sonia Walker. For some reason, Sonia, you had audio access, and then it's telling me that for some reason you no longer have audio access. I just sent you an audio pin, and that audio pin is #47#, and that way we can enable your audio. So, Sonia?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi, I'm Sonia Walker, Director of Gateway to College at Mott Community College in Flint, Michigan.
All right, Sonia, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right, so we're just going to dive right in.
All right, so we'll talk a little bit about the outcomes for this call. One of the things that we want to do is we want to raise your awareness about the key cognitive strategies and how they support how they support college readiness. We want to make sure that we understand what those key cognitive strategies are, how they support college success, and then also we want to talk about the implications for your work around supporting students in becoming college ready. So how we're going to do that, we're going to look very briefly at some of Conley's research on college readiness, just to provide you an overview of how he put this information together. We're going to highlight the 4 dimensions of college readiness, which is a key central point to developing college readiness as he's developed it in his research. We're going to do some reflection on some of the excerpts from the article Redefining College Readiness, and then we're going to talk with you and have you share some of the implications for your work based on our time together. So to talk a little bit about Conley's research on this topic, he has spent about 20 years researching college readiness, and some of the ways that he has done this is doing a study of 38 high schools, and these particular high schools were considered exemplars. They were providing exceptional support for students in preparing them for post-secondary education. In addition to that, we'll be looking at information that is reflective of a 3-year study of more than 400 faculty and staff members from 20 research universities around the country. And in addition to that, he also used an analysis of college entry courses in order to determine the information that we'll be talking about today. So college readiness. This is Conley's definition. The knowledge, skills, attributes a student should possess to be ready to succeed in entry-level college courses across the range of subjects and disciplines. And so as we're talking about college readiness, this is how Conley is defining that term. College readiness, according to his research, is broken into 4 dimensions. The first being key cognitive strategies, then content knowledge, academic behaviors, and contextual skills and awareness. Now, this visual just represents what those dimensions are. They are not as linear or as nicely, neatly nested as they are in this visual. They do interact a lot more than what this visual portrays, but this does give you a clear idea of what those dimensions are. And again, it's noted that key cognitive strategies, and then the rest of the list noted there. So how are those key cognitive strategies defined? And this visual, or this slide, really breaks those down. Just noting the highlighted information for each of these. Intellectual openness, when we're talking about that, we're talking about ways in which college is constructed. Inquisitiveness, we're talking about the active inquiry and dialogue around particular subject matter and research. For analysis, we're talking about being able to identify and evaluate data. For reasoning and proof and argumentation, we're talking about students being able to construct a well-reasoned argument. For interpretation, we're looking at being able to present both orally and in writing. For precision and accuracy, being able to understand what kind of precision is appropriate for what it is the student is working towards. And then for problem solving, being able to apply multiple strategies in order to solve problems. So we have a prompt that we'd like to have, or an excerpt from the article that we'd like to share with you. As you read this excerpt, we'd like for you to think about words, phrases, or thoughts that resonate with you as you're reading this article. We'll put that article up in a moment, give you a little bit of time to read it, and then ask you to just jump in and share some of your thoughts, or we will call on a few people to share their thoughts. So here's the first excerpt. So think about what words, phrases, or thoughts resonate with you as you read this excerpt. If there's anyone ready to share some of that, please jump in.
I'm looking, this is Kay Blue. I'm looking at a period of time. That's something I think that some of the students who've come into our courses and developmental courses are lacking. They haven't had a lot of time to develop some of the patterns. So we have to figure out a way to accelerate that, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. That really does speak to that challenge of time. And as you said, you know, that they have not come in with some of those skills, and they do need time in order to develop those habits and ways of thinking. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else?
This is Peg. I keep in on habits because the college success strategies that our students take in the foundation term keys in on 11 habits of mind and how successful people develop those habits to make them work for them, and how our students need to work to be able to do that.
Thank you. And we know that with habits, again, it takes time in order to develop a habit. And so, you know, again, thinking through how many opportunities, or what kinds of opportunities do we need to have students have in order to practice and experience what it is that we're wanting them to learn and develop in order for it to become a habit. So Peg, thank you for sharing that.
And I'll just jump in here real quick. This is Prentice. The idea expressed here reminds me a lot of a sports scenario, and sort of the coach and the athlete, and it reminds me of the job of a coach, particular for a player, i.e. student, who have not been exposed to, let's say, basketball is the sport, and you have a player who's just starting off and playing for the first year. the habits of minds and the skills for a first-year player aren't typically well developed. And so those habits and behaviors actually need to be developed over time such that they become patterns. And to me, that speaks to the onus of the program to be really intentional about the things that they are coaching their students on, such that those behaviors become patterns and habits that are ingrained over time.
Thank you, Bridget. Anyone else?
This is Christopher. I'll just jump in as well. The period of time phrase really jumped out at me as well. And along the lines of what Prentice was saying, I think the students also need to be aware of that time, and that we need to help them develop the patience that they need, because we're kind of into this instant gratification, and I want to learn how to do it right now, and it does take a long time to develop habits and skills to get better at something.
Yeah. Well said. Thank you. All right.
So the second one comes from the dimension that has to do with contextual skills and awareness, again, which is another one of Conley's dimensions of college readiness. So go ahead and take a couple minutes and read this, and again, we'll ask for your thoughts. All right, so what are your thoughts with regard to this quote relating to contextual skills and awareness?
Well, this is Kay again. I guess this one kind of speaks to me because just this week I had a student who had sort of a frustration meltdown. And I guess the thing that I find instructing in developmental types of areas is walking the fine line between understanding their frustration and not wanting to humiliate them, and at the same time guiding them into the kinds of behaviors that will help them make them successful, if that makes sense. And I find sometimes that's a really tricky line to walk because I want to be accepting and encouraging. On the other hand, I want them to let them know that they really do need to work at developing the success strategies too.
Yeah, that's an interesting balance, right? It's like how much should a student be coddled? And, if we want them to develop strong habits of mind, then, there's a fine line between over-supporting a student and allowing them to develop their own habits and skills. What are some other thoughts?
This is Chris. I have more of a question about the phrase privileged information. What do people think is meant by privileged information?
I think that's a great question, Chris. What this quote is trying to get at and is the fact that for Gateway to College, in many instances, our students are first-generation college goers. The college environment, the contextual environment, comes with a whole host of contextual cues, culture, practices, conventions, and for a first-time college goer, they are not necessarily privileged to those ways of being. And you might have heard this referred to sort of as a cultural capital. Sometimes you hear that first-time college goers aren't equipped usually with the cultural capital to just jump in and be successful. This article is calling out the need to be intentional about learning about the contextual environment and developing those skills and awareness to be successful in that environment. So does that help?
Yeah, I just think the word privileged is interesting.
Yeah, and I think and again, these are Conley's words, and you might agree, and you may have chosen different words, and I may have chosen different words, but I think the privilege is what he's saying is this is not information that's readily available to all. Rather, again, in the example that I gave with the first-time college goer, they don't just have that information. It's going to take some effort to learn of the contextual skills and awareness that's needed to succeed in that environment. So it's a call to action for our programs to work to make students aware of those things.
This is Deb. I think it also highlights just a larger issue outside of Gateway, in that not every student, I interpreted the privileged information piece as not every student has a support system or the access to the school resources for whatever reason that would inform them and kind of help guide them towards that college experience and success in that college experience. And I think it validates what we do in Gateway as part of that Gateway model, with the simple things such as that first-year seminar course, where we are going in depth into the habits of mind and that quote privileged unquote information that regular first-generation students may not have. So I think that I think a student coming into Gateway and taking that College for Success or mandatory first-year seminar course is actually going to be a few steps ahead of someone coming out of a traditional school system and into college without any type of support like that.
Thank you, Deb.
Yeah, and Deb, this is Georgia. I would love to echo the comments being said and underscore what Chris is highlighting here in noticing that phrase, privileged information. And like Deb was saying, I think that it's so important in the model and the ways that the program is already suggested to be structured and designed is really around supporting students to develop those college-ready skills. And this is an area that can be overlooked, but definitely encouraging folks to pay attention to is recognizing, like Prentice was saying, that many students don't come already equipped with that cultural backdrop of knowing those hidden rules or the conventions about how higher education and the community college as a system is working. And what I wanted to highlight in recognizing that phrase, privileged information, is that in addition to supporting students to be ready and recognize those conventions, we're also supporting students to be who they are and have support for who they are and not necessarily assimilate to some of the dominant norms of that system, because we recognize our students are in many ways changing the system by virtue of being that dual degree student. And so that's the flip side, is supporting them in their very unique position and unique qualities and attributes, so that they, as the learners and individuals they are comfortable and acclimating to the environment and not necessarily assimilating.
Thank you, Georgia. All right, so this excerpt obviously touched some feelings in a lot of people, and I appreciate everyone's thoughts. We're going to keep it moving to the third excerpt that has to do with fostering college readiness.
Yeah. So again, take a few moments, take a look at that, and then we're going to ask you to share what resonates with you. All right. Anyone ready to jump in and share their thoughts on this? So yesterday we had some conversation about what this excerpt might actually be saying, and so I just want to talk a little bit about some of the background information here. One of the things that Conley says is essential is that the school develop an intellectual climate, and what he means by that is that the school is very clear and explicit with students about the fact that thinking is important here, that it's not just about going through the motions of getting an education, but truly, or going through the motions to, pass a course or earn the credit. But it's really about understanding and thinking and exercising intellect and critical thinking. And so I think part of what he's saying here is that it's important for the college to set that norm, that's what the expectation is for students that are a part of the program. If you're really wanting to be college ready, it's not just about going through the motions, but it really is about developing your intellect. And as we were sharing some of the areas in which he explains what that means, but he's also saying here that this is something that schools need to do as far as setting this tone and setting this expectation. Is there anyone that would like to add to that? Okay.
And, in just a few moments, we'll come back to ways to foster college readiness. And we'll, you might be thinking, because we'll come back to this idea of how you might foster college readiness at the program level. We'll also come back to a couple of examples about around the intellectual climate of the school and how you might begin to promote that.
Also, I want to add, too, that we are pulling these excerpts from an article. So I do want to encourage you, as Prentice mentioned at the beginning of the call, the materials for this call that we use to develop this call are going to be posted on Gateway Live. So I really do want to encourage you to visit Gateway Live, pull this article, take a few minutes to go through it and read some of this, and it will provide, I think, even more of a context for these excerpts that we have pulled out of.
All right, thank you. So taking a look at the Conley's second dimension, it has to do with key content, knowledge, and skills. And so key content across the subject areas, and what David Conley refers to as the big ideas. And so these are, across each of the subject areas, there are things that students need to know and be able to do. If we take science, for example, students need to be well versed in the empirical method, and students also need to be aware of how to support their conclusions with documentation. So those are some of the big ideas that exist in the subject area of science that travel from the basic introductory level of science all the way through, essentially that's the theme that carries throughout multiple levels of science and doesn't go away. And so Conley's putting forward that there are other big ideas across other subject areas that similarly essentially cascade throughout the multiple levels of a given subject area. And with these big ideas, he believes that they include core content, knowledge, and skills, and the science example was an example of that. But he also suggests that there's this overarching knowledge and skills that are also associated with that, and we'll take a look at those in just a second. So the overarching content, knowledge, and skills, according to Conley, which he believes are at the heart of student success. And so essentially he's saying it's great if students know a lot, but here's a couple of core things that students need to be skilled at. And one of them is writing. And students need to have a knowledge of how to do pre-writes and edits, present their arguments clearly, and mostly free of grammatical and spelling errors. And then the other key content, knowledge, and skill area that Conley puts forward as being overarching, again, of all of those other subject areas is research. So being able to incorporate appropriate strategies to answer problems and questions, but then also have the ability to evaluate the appropriateness of source materials and also synthesize those materials into a coherent document. So this is a visual of what I was just talking about, just helping you understand how Conley's presented this idea, again, of the core content, knowledge, and skills that are associated with subject areas. There's an overarching skill that is at the heart of college success, and that's the ability to write and the ability to research. And we'll take a look at some core content skills here. So for English, Conley's pointed out things like, of course, word analysis, the ability to identify key points, terms, and concepts, for example. This is a book, and for all of these content, knowledge, and skills, this is a boiled down version and is not meant to be all-inclusive. And if you were to develop this, it might be inclusive of this information, but you might also have some other items to add. With regard to math, understanding basic concepts, principles, and techniques, the ability to apply contextual understanding, then also that ability to estimate. We had someone on the call yesterday that rightly pointed out that said, hey, you know, understanding basic concepts and principles and techniques of algebra is great, but we're trying to get our students to just do some basic math. And yes, that's absolutely true. So it's more of a yes, and our students, the target is still college readiness. And so if a student is struggling with basic math, the content, knowledge, and skills won't go, they're not going away. They show up again and again and again throughout the course material. So there has to be a strategy in place to move that student from rudimentary arithmetic to slowly begin to understand those other basic concepts of math. Similarly with science, you know, understanding the scientific method, drawing conclusions. Similarly with social science, there's a bit of the scientific method incorporated there. And then also we know in social science as well, there's a lot of theories and concepts. So you get the idea across these multiple subject areas. All right, so with this third dimension, we're talking about academic behaviors. So notice the shift. At first, we were talking about the things that students need to know. And now we shifted into, well, what are sort of the behaviors that support college readiness? And as you can see here, Conley's quote says, key academic behaviors consist largely of self-monitoring and study skills. And I'll just ask this is more of a rhetorical question, and this question is really getting at this idea of metacognition. For folks who have been involved in instruction, just think about this for a second. How many times have you sat down with a student, let's say midway through the semester, to talk about progress, and your understanding is that the student is struggling in the course material and essentially is not performing at a level that he or she should be. And you sit down with that student and you ask the student, hey, how do you think you're doing in this class? and inevitably you get something that sounds like, oh, I think I'm doing pretty good, I'm doing all right, and you know for a fact that they're not even passing the class at that point. This is that metacognition that Conley's talking about. So what level of awareness do students have of their own skill level, and what level does a student have, what level of awareness does a student have about their own content gaps and what they need to focus on to close those gaps? And so the example I gave was obviously the antithesis of this level of metacognition, where a student would rightfully say, you know what, I know that I'm struggling, particularly on quadratic equations. And then that would be your cue to say, you know what, I struggled on that too, or whatever. And then the other thing is study skills, which is inclusive of study group participation, how a student manages their time and prepares for tests, takes advantage of informational resources, note-taking, taking advantage of office hours to communicate with teachers. And then this fourth dimension, we dug into a quote here, so we got a little bit of a primer. Again, this is back to knowledge and awareness of the system, so the context in which students would operate. And, you know, Conley puts forth here that having an understanding and knowledge of the educational system, of course, those norms, values, and conventions, as well as the human relations skills. See, so now it goes from knowing, but also having some skill to be able to cope and adapt in that particular context. So that's really where Conley's getting at with regard to the contextual skills and awareness. So we just like to get your thoughts, just based on what you've heard so far, in your estimation, and some ideas started to creep up too when we solicited your feedback from these excerpts that we shared. But what are some structures and practices that you can implement, or maybe you already have in place, that can foster college readiness in students? And be thinking about the program culture. So what are some things that you can do, that you've already done, that foster college readiness insofar as the culture of the program? And then also from an instructional perspective, what can teachers do to foster that college readiness? And then also, what are some ways that we can foster college readiness for students? Fostering college readiness for teachers and students. What are your thoughts about that question? So I'm just gonna start calling names. Sonia, what's your response to some ways that you might be able to foster college readiness and Gateway to College students?
When I was thinking about this, Prentice, I was thinking in regards to college readiness for our students. I thought about culture and just assisting students with college tours and orientation, doing orientation, new student orientation, since we are new, is helping students understand what that college environment is like, and the support systems that are on the college, but also helping us in the process, some of the processes in the college system.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's real important. You know, those long lines, right? The first week of the semester, you know, just put yourselves in the minds of the students who are on that campus for the first time when school is in. Am I in the right line? Who do I need to talk to? I'm not even sure I'm going to the right people. We've all been there. We know how frustrating that is. So very, very good.
Classroom.
Or how to find your class. It's something as basic as that, right?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Sonia. Anyone else?
This is Kay. I'm going to focus from an instructional point of view because that's what I do. Right now, what I've been charged with for the fall, where we start up our Gateway program, is to design a course that will be a combination of a 2-credit established study skills course on our campus, adding an additional credit that will help students prepare for the Ohio graduation test that comes from our partner school district. And I think as I look at the material there, the idea is to help students develop their skills, ideally to, or eventually to be successful in their college courses, but also to pass that graduation test.
Wow, that sounds like a wonderful idea.
I hope it works.
Let's see, Peg, you've been doing this for a couple of years.
One of the structures that we added for our transition term is a transition seminar, and our students meet once a week, and the student resource specialist who taught the college success strategies class to them in the foundation teaches a transition seminar, and they continue to build on those 11 habits of mind that they introduced to. So there's a mini lesson with each time that they meet, and questions, practice those pieces, because we saw that our students were doing well in foundation, relatively well in foundation, and we're on the quarter system here, so we only have 11 weeks. But when they moved into transition and we transitioned them into comprehensive campus, they did not do well at all that first year. So by adding the transition seminar this second year, we've increased their success/passage rate for their transition term by almost 40 percentage points. So,
awesome.
That is great.
yeah, we were thrilled.
So, and it's good. We're Kay shared some cool ideas. You shared some cool ideas. So hopefully others are picking up on some of these wonderful initiatives that you're bringing forward. We have time for one more thought on this particular slide. Anyone else? Okay. All right. So thanks for your thoughts. And thinking about program culture that has a focus of promoting that intellectual development, here are just a couple of ideas. Again, not the end-all, be-all, and we'll encourage you to incorporate some of the ideas that were already shared, but do some further thinking about ways to instill within the program culture this environment that's focused on and promotes intellectual development. But one of the ways to do that maybe is ensure, for the instructional staff, ensure that as you're creating your academic content, make sure that students come away with an awareness of what the big ideas are. Because again, remember that these are the ideas that are recurring throughout the successive levels in a given content area. So they show up again and again, and there's no way that a student should be coming out of basic English and not know what a topic sentence is, or a main point, or supporting arguments. You also might think about adopting exit standards that specify what students will know and be able to do across subject areas. So again, those key content, that key content knowledge, students should not be walking away out of your classes without knowing very concretely what the key content knowledge is. Another way to foster college readiness at the program level might be to incorporate those key cognitive strategies that Galen mentioned a little bit ago. Incorporate some of those strategies into your assignments that increase in complexity over time. You don't want to hit the students with the kitchen sink, the first week of class, but design the curriculum such that those strategies can get more complex. Then you also might think about ways to provide students more control and responsibility for their own learning over time. These might be things around rewrites, the use of rubrics, self-critiques and self-assessments, and those types of things. With regard to fostering college readiness and providing the necessary supports to students, we've dug into this one just a little bit ago, and folks had a lot of good ideas. But incorporate those college readiness activities into school routines, and some of the focus areas might have to do with financial aid and admissions, discussions about what students are noticing about how people act and interact on the college campus, and get into a conversation about what the college culture and sort of those cultural norms are. And then also incorporate resume creation as part of students being ready.
Another thing that we would want to encourage people to do is encourage students or engage students in experiences that have them interacting with various types of text, in particular informational text. Engage them in interpreting graphs and charts, demonstrating fluency in different modes of writing, and again, most notably, as it states here, expository writing and descriptive writing. And then show quantitative literacy around number systems and around concepts of algebra and geometry.
Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to jump on a couple of the points that you made here. With regard to informational text, it might be as simple as getting the English 101 text from the college and finding an article in there, copying it, and using that as a basis for your assignment in language arts. You might also consider, for the numerical literacy, every day there are statistics in the paper. Have conversations around what students' interpretations are about those statistics that show up in public mediums on a regular basis. So I just wanted to throw out a couple of concrete ways to do some of those things.
Excellent. In addition to fostering college readiness in those kinds of activities with students, it's also about making sure that teachers have the support that they need in order to do this work. And so creating a community of practice where teachers are able to discuss the practices that they're having in their classroom, developing and supporting that intellectual culture, and also creating as a team what that definition of college ready is, and then how that's going to be communicated to students. Well, it looks like we are really down to our time now. I wanted to take we've got just a few more minutes here, but I did want to very briefly just hit those outcomes as far as what we were talking about today and what we hope you're experiencing as a result of this conversation. Again, we wanted to raise the awareness of the key cognitive strategies that support college readiness. We wanted to understand how these strategies support college success, and then have you thinking about the implications for your work around helping students become college ready. So at this point, we'd like to open up kind of the question and answer time. Any questions or thoughts that anyone would like to share around some of the discussion that we've had today?
This is Deb. I would say that for new programs, to maybe have a conversation with your student life or academic affairs folks, just to find out what do they see as far as in instances where regular students are just not prepared, and what they would do differently. And I would think just incorporating some of those bits and pieces of advice into your orientation. I'm a strong believer in just kind of right out of the starting gate, fully immersing the students into the campus culture in not an overwhelming way, but a gradual and friendly and safe way through the student orientation as the first start, and making that like a positive, uplifting, team-building type of event where they are, it could be a multi-day process where they're meeting different folks on campus and learning where everything is, so that by the time the first day of classes roll around, they're actually rolling into their new home, their new educational home, with a certain level of comfort. Because I think if you delete some of that fear factor, then they're able to focus more on the academic challenges ahead of them.
Thank you for that, Deb. Anyone else?
Going once, going twice?
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, we want to thank you for your wonderful comments. There were some great ideas shared throughout the call and at the end of the call. And again, we just want to thank you for your time and attentiveness and just being a thought partner with us as we talk about ways to help our students become college ready. And of course, there isn't one way to do it. Conley has suggested a number of ways, but that could be the basis for which to build off of. So again, we want to thank you. And again, this information, the recorded webinar and associated Conley articles will be posted on Gateway Live on Monday. So we just wish you a wonderful weekend and a wonderful rest of your day.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you.